means you can be more intentional. You hear me talk about intention a lot, and like I've touched, like last time I touched upon shutter speeds, for example. Just you have a lot more control on a traditional camera. Like Carrie, if you went and photographed one of your kids' sports games and you had the choice between a camera or a phone, I'd always say take the camera, even if the camera was 30 years old. Because just the level of control that you can get in terms of being able to like freeze your kids, freeze your pets, whatever. Plus, there's loads of other stuff you can do. What brand does it carry? Can you remember?
Canon.
Okay, cool. Um, so the other advantage of the camera, and I'm not going to talk too much about cameras today because it's not fair on everyone else listening to the recording. But if you remember, you've heard me talk about with the iPhone how you can flick between those like numbers like 0.5, 1, 3, which uses something called optical zoom.
Hmm.
And then when you go past that, you get digital zoom, which is when things become really pixelated, which like, I don't know if you're photographing your kid playing baseball and you're trying to zoom all the way in on them, they're going to look blurry just because there's not enough pixels. With a camera, it's only optical zoom. There is no digital zoom. So you'll hit a ceiling where you'll be like, darn it, I can't get any closer than there. And I'm trying to photograph the cheetah like that's 400 meters away from me. But the general quality of the photography that you'll get, especially if you shoot in RAW, which you now know how to, you'll have to change your camera to do on that, but your camera will have the capability to do that. It also gives you, and I mean this class primarily is an iPhone class, which is we've always taught as an iPhone, but the cameras give you a little bit more flexibility for what you can do afterwards
Okay.
that you don't have from an iPhone. So it just opens up the kind of Pandora's box of creativity in terms of stuff that you can do. So especially, I mean, a lot of the knowledge I think, Carrie, that you would have gained from these chunk of lessons is as applicable to your camera as it is to your phone. The
Okay.
only difference is you've got to figure out how to do it on your camera, um, because I haven't talked about that. So you've got to figure out like, how do I change the shutter speed on my camera? How do I just change the shutter speed, for example? How do I and photography is made up of these three like foundational pillars, which create something called the exposure. I'm not drawing a triangle there, the exposure triangle, which is shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And on an iPhone, it's very difficult to change those other two, the aperture and the ISO. You can, but it's not easy. On a camera, you actually have the ability to do a number of things. One of them is to be able to just change one of those things at any one time, and you let the camera control the other things. So, for example, if we were doing anything with movement, we would just control the shutter speed, and we'd let the camera worry about the other two, aperture and ISO. You can write it down on your on your Canon camera carry. That will be TV mode,
Okay.
means shutter speed priority. That basically just means you control the shutter speed. The camera does everything else. If you don't do that, you end up with pictures that are crazily bright or crazily dark because the camera is not self-correcting for the fact that you are. Well, think about it. If you use a fast shutter speed, are you letting in less light or more light?
Uh,
Curtains opening really quickly. Imagine if I was in your room
oh,
right
less light,
now.
less light.
You got it.
Yes.
Less light, exactly. So the camera's like, oh my God, Carrie's letting in hardly any light. What do I do to compensate? And the way that it needs to compensate is one of the things that it can do is it opens up the aperture, which is kind of like the iris in our eye. It's like if you're ever go to a sports game and you look on the side of the field and you see all these photographers with ginormous lenses who are having to use very fast shutter speeds because they're trying to freeze the football player, like making a catch. Not only is their lenses big this way, but more importantly, their lenses are big this way,
Mhm.
which means that they can use fast shutter speeds, but they can let in a lot of light at the same time. And when you're in TV mode, the camera takes care of that for you. So all you have to worry about is the shutter speeds.
Okay.
The holy grail is to get to manual, where you control all three. But I don't think you're quite yet that. And that takes a process. And I wouldn't want you just shooting on manual because then you'd be like, oh my God, why are all my pictures like all over the place? because it takes a lot more thinking. And you also, at least in this class,
Sure.
bless you. I haven't provided a lesson on aperture because you can't really change the aperture on an iPhone. Um, but yeah, Carrie, if you get into your camera again, I can definitely help you out, show you around it, give you a little tour of. I feel like you usually need like someone needs like an hour like whiz tour of here's everything on the camera, here's what I need to use, here's the things that aren't relevant, here's the things that are relevant.
Yeah,
Um,
I would love that actually, because I think I used it just as like a point and shoot for so long, but then as my iPhone camera got better, I was like, these are better than what I'm ta like. I know that it's my limitation, but I wasn't taking great
yeah,
pictures on it.
you absolutely, and you're in the same camp as a lot of people. The iPhone just makes life easier. It makes
And
life
I told
easier.
Carrie I got her that 16 because of her photos of the chair.
Oh, nice. Good.
And I have a question real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm trying to send it to you through Photoshop. And do you want me to share, like when it asks me, it's in a TIFF format. So
No, JPEG, JPEG.
just do a JPEG. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's a JPEG. Hey, Carol.
Hi.
Yeah. So yeah, Carrie, to yours. Yeah, reach out to me and we'll see if we can schedule an hour or so,
That'd be great.
and let's get you back into using your camera because I do think you'd have a lot of benefit from it with the acquired knowledge that you now have.
Hey,
Um,
Carrie, I mean, do you want to do a thing with the DSLRs? Like a little tutorial?
Yeah, I think that would be great.
I mean, depending
I'm
on,
probably not going to do that today just because it's
no,
not.
no, not today, but like in the future.
Yeah, I that would be great.
The
Okay, great.
only problem, Yvonne, with teaching SLRs,
Yeah.
DSLRs as a group is that someone has a Sony, someone has a Canon, someone has
Oh,
an Nikon, someone has an Olympus. And what happens, and I've done it many times, but what happens is I say one thing to the Canon person and the Nikon person, the button's in totally the opposite place on the opposite side of the camera.
oh,
And then
okay.
everyone's putting out their hands and everyone's saying, hold on, I can't find that button on mine. Um, and that's why actually teaching iPhone is so easy because you all have the same tool. When you go and annoyingly, like Canon, Nikon, Sony, they make it very hard to switch between brands.
Oh,
Kind of like Windows and PC. They put everything the other way around. Even how on a Canon, when you zoom it, when you turn the lens, it zooms anti-clockwise. On a Nikon, it zooms clockwise. Literally the total wrong way around. So you throw a Nikon camera into a Canon person's thing, they're totally thrown. I teach on all of them and have loads of experience. But yeah, it's generally easier carry. I would say let's do a one-on-one. Just send me an email and I'll see if I can. And Yvonne, if you need something, I can help with that. Carol, Eric, good morning. We've got a nice small group today. So thanks. Yvonne's just sending her pictures, and then
trying to.
a couple of concepts I want to teach to you guys today. A bit more conceptual to push you a little bit further along. Um, I know you, Carol, thank you. I know you sent me some pictures. I've got them ready and raring to go. Oh,
For
you're,
some reason, I thought I had sent three in one email, but only one went through, so I sent a couple more. Just
well, I saw you just sent one,
I know it,
but
and
I think I already had that one.
okay, I don't know. My computer's acting up.
It's okay. Don't worry. Uh, when you guys are like, Carol, when you send your pictures, do you go to the computer and then you send them from the computer, or you send them direct from your
I
phone?
send them through the computer, but because I was on the Lightroom, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it wasn't like I couldn't send it as easily. I don't know. It
Okay, so
was
you had the same problem as Yvonne.
okay.
Maybe I should talk through that issue with everyone. Because maybe people on the group had the same issue. So if you all pick up your phones actually, and Yvonne, you can carry on sending your picture. And when you take a picture on your if you go into the Lightroom app, I'm going to do it with you guys, and you take a picture, okay, and then so take a picture, and then you're going to come out of it. Okay, so let me know once you're taking a picture. Okay, and then review the picture. I'll wait for Carrie to catch up. Okay, let me know once you're there. So as in like you're looking at a picture of the picture. Got it? Okay. Then on the carry you there. You with me? Okay. Top right-hand corner is a square with an arrow sticking up when you're looking at the picture. Okay. If you click on that, there's a thing that says save copy to device. And if you click on that, it may say Lightroom wants access to your photos because you've never done it before. And just hit OK. And what that will do is it will save it straight to your camera roll, like where all your other photos live. And then you can just email it straight from there. Carry, you're on mute. You may have to take it. So you can keep yourself.
Yeah. So do you like to be in the Lightroom app
Yeah,
to
so
take pictures?
no, the reason we, if you remember, the reason we wanted to stay in the Lightroom app, and maybe you missed this because Harry, you didn't see the recording from last time, but we were using the Lightroom app to let us change the shutter speed on our phones. Otherwise, we don't have any control. So the
Right.
Lightroom app is the most popular and easiest way to be able to change the shutter speed on an iPhone, which helps us dictate how movement looks in our picture. I don't need you in the Lightroom app every time you take a picture, but if you're photographing anything that's moving, like if you went to a sports game and you're like, I've just got my iPhone, I would definitely encourage you to go into the Lightroom app. And Carrie, you can go back and watch the recording of how to do it. Now you've got it. But that's the primary reason is it lets you basically make your phone a little bit more like a traditional camera. And once you've taken that picture, it lives in like a separate little library that Lightroom has. But the question is, I want to get it to where all my other photos are in Apple. And the easiest way to do that is when you're reviewing the photo, you hit that little square with an arrow pointing up the top. You hit save copy to device. And then it's there. You can even, if you want to skip that step and you just want to email it to me, underneath save copy to device, it says share. And if you hit share, you'll come up your normal things along the bottom. Do you want to text it? Do you want to email it? You can just email it straight to me, straight out of library. Can you see that, Carol?
No, I'm not. I'm just going to do I think I need to do a tutorial with Lightroom on my computer. I don't like editing on my phone, so I put it onto my computer
Okay,
because the
that's fine.
phone's so small.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I mean, that's definitely my preference. 100%. I'd much rather you do it on the computer. Just a lot of people don't have the patience or want to do that. But yes, once it's a little bit different once it's in Lightroom on your computer, you have to again you should be able to share it straight from there. But the best way to think about Lightroom is a pun on the word darkroom. It's a digital darkroom. So it's like the place where we go to experiment and play with our photos, but nothing's really real. Everything's kind of this like in this virtual state. And only once we share it is it's kind of like pressing print, does it become like a real tangible thing that you can then send to me or put in a book or do whatever you want to do. Um, so if you're having issues with that, Carol, I can definitely help. But you should, and you did it. You shared them with me, so you got them to me. So you, by hook or by crook, however you did it, you managed to do it. So well done. But yeah, you got them to me. So just do as you were doing. But if you have any issues, you just let me know. If
Okay.
did you get those? Did you get those sent?
Well, I sent two of them by mail drop because it wouldn't send them. I took one of them off. It was three, and then and I just had to let my dog out. So I'll do it again.
Ah, there we go. My dog on Lightroom app. I got them. I got them.
I just got two. Did you get three of them?
I got two of them.
Okay, let me send you another one.
Okay, and then I'm gonna kick off and I'm gonna
Okay,
share.
go ahead. Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're fine. I'm just gonna while you're doing that, I'm gonna bring this in.
And I use the telephoto thing on the.
Good, good. We'll talk about it in a minute. Let me just bring it in, and then I'm gonna share the screen. We'll go from there. So, what type of dog do you have?
She's she's a golden doodle. It's my daughter's pandemic puppy that
I have a Cavapoo. Similar.
Okay.
Uh,
We just lost our other dog last Monday. So
I'm
that
sorry.
was the one in the pictures of the white dog ghost in the kitchen. So but he was 15, so it's all right. Let's see. Where's that?
I got to move on. I got him. Which is good.
Well, oh, hang
You
on.
can send me the other one, but I'm going to kick off.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just going to put these into my presentation and let's go. Okay, we'll start with your picture. Why not? So really nice small group today. So you guys, if you have any questions, you can keep yourself off mute. Like, I can kind of tailor the class more towards anything specific that you guys have. If you have any specific questions, I do have to keep it somewhat general because everyone else is going to watch the recording. So I can't just dive in, Carrie, and just say, here's how to use your kind of Canon camera. But I can definitely kind of help you guys troubleshoot a little bit more on a one-on-one level. Hey, Carol.
What is the difference between DNG and JPEG? So like if you're,
Good
is it
question.
like raw versus
Yeah.
DNG would be like raw?
Yeah. So DNG stands for digital negative.
Okay.
And all a DNG is it's a computer generated version of a raw file. So when it comes out of your phone, comes out of your camera, it's going to be like a raw file. When we take a JPEG and we choose to export it or make it a DNG, the computer basically converts it and it like goes from being this small to being this big. It makes it much bigger, about 4 times the size. The advantage of that is it gives us more pixels to play with. And by that, I mean, when you edit the photo, it's something called non-destructive editing. When you edit a JPEG, it's kind of like every time you do an edit, it's kind of like scratching away and it makes the photo slightly worse. A DNG, like a raw file, and the raw file extension, if you ever see it on your computer that comes out of an iPhone, is .heic. Don't ask me what that stands for. But like and carry on your Canon camera would be .cr2. For those on the recording, if you have a Nikon, it'd be .nef. If you're on a Sony, it would be .ar7. There's all these AR2, AR7. They each have different file extensions, but it's all the same. It basically just means, Carol, that we have a much bigger canvas to work with to begin with. And that's also really advantageous because let's say I was your picture and I was all the way back here and you just wanted to crop in on me. Because you have a much bigger thing to begin with, kind of like imagining you had a giant canvas and then you wanted to only cut out the middle, or you had the same picture on a 6x4 picture and you wanted to cut out the middle, you're going to end up with a tiny weeny little one on the JPEG. So it doesn't, we call it pixel pushing. It doesn't allow us to crop in as much without losing quality. So generally we want to stay in the realm, and Lightroom, the one you've been playing with maybe a little bit on your computer, Carol, a lot of the time will give you the option to convert something to a DNG. Sometimes it will do it even automatically. It depends how your Lightroom's set up. But yes, it stands for digital negative. Carol, out of interest, the Lightroom that you've got on your computer, is that when you look at the little icon down at the bottom, does it say LR or does it say LRC?
No, it's just LR.
Just LR. Okay, cool. So that's the mobile version.
Oh, on my computer, I don't know what it says on my computer.
Have a look.
Yeah.
Because in the long run, and again, this is like a little bit advanced for the beginners club. Like, oh, well, I don't think you guys are beginners anymore, but beginners to intermediate. In the long run, if you're someone who really gets into photography and starts taking loads and loads and loads of pictures and starts doing it as a hobby and having fun photographing family and friends and events and travel, it's really confusing. There's 2 versions of Lightroom. One used to be called Lightroom and one used to be called Lightroom Mobile. And they rebranded the whole thing about a year and a half ago. And now you have one that's called Lightroom, which is the one I got you to all download on your phones last week. And then you have one that's called Lightroom Classic, LRC. And Lightroom Classic is the behemoth mothership, all the bells and whistles. And Lightroom And if you paid for one, you get the other. So you've got them both. It's just a case of you have to download it on your computer. The other one, Lightroom, is actually Lightroom Mobile. It's like Lightroom Lite. It's got about 20% of what the other one has to do, which in the long run, if you get really into photography, you're like, oh my God, I'd love to make a coffee table book and I'd love to do this. It's much better and more efficient. And you can do it in Lightroom Classic and you can't do it in Lightroom Mobile, which is actually just called Lightroom now. So one's when you look at the little app, the little square, one says LR and one says LRC.
Yeah.
You want on your computer, ideally, and I teach tons of Lightroom classes, and I have not taught it purposely to this group because so many people are just on phones here. But Lightroom Classic is 99.99999% of people who are into photography and do anything with their photos, and especially Carol, put them on your computer because it's easier to edit. It's nicer because you see them on a nice big screen, are using Lightroom Classic. So if you haven't got it, download it.
I think I do have it. Yeah.
Yeah, you would have got it. It would have come at the same time. And again, it's the kind of thing that like, I don't know whether this group would be the right group because there's a lot of people who aren't using computers here. Lots of people, especially on the recording, lots of people who just take pictures on their iPhone or just on their iPad. You can't even get Lightroom Classic on those things. You can only get it on a computer. Hold on one sec.
Sorry.
No, I'm good. You're good. I just wanted to finish my train of thought. So yeah, benefit of everyone on the recording. When you sign up with Adobe and you pay your $9.99 subscription, every single one of you with that gets those two versions, LR and LRC. Now, if you're just on an iPad or an iPhone, you can't download LRC Lightroom Classic. It doesn't let you. It's not available. But if you go on your computer, you'll have it. And in the long run, that's the one that I would firmly recommend and advocate that you use. Yvonne, go for it.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking at, I have Creative Suite, so I just, the one that had whatever. So I just would do LRC just to see it because I didn't see it up there.
Yeah, you just download it. Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
cool.
Search the apps, you'll have it. So you can even just type in Lightroom Classic, and you'll see. And that's the one. Like it's kind of another big advantage of it. I'm just sharing my screen so you can see. So this is Lightroom Classic that I'm in here, and this is on one of my computers. So you can see here that, see up here, it says all photographs, 436,000. Now I've got another one that's got like 700,000, and I see some people and they have like 2 million here.
Oh my
The
God.
big advantage of Lightroom Classic. And actually, it's kind of interesting. Apple tried to make a contender program. They called it Aperture, and it was out for years. And then they basically stopped making it because everyone was just using Lightroom. And on your Apple computer, if you're on an Apple, you're all on an Apple, right? Everyone here on an Apple? Yeah. On your Apple computer, you have that Photos app, which looks like the rainbow. And this is like the Photos app is down here and Lightroom Classic is up here. The beauty of all having these 436,000, and for you, it may be 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, it builds up, is you can do stuff with them, see them, play with them without them ever actually being on your computer. I.e., they don't take up any space.
Oh, great.
It is massive. So these 436,000 my computer would be dead if I had all of those on my hard drive. But a big and the best analogy I can use for Lightroom is it's like in a film camera, taking your negatives, DNGs, Carol, that's your RAWs, you bring them into the darkroom to develop them. That's Lightroom now, because Lightroom is the digital darkroom. You organize them, you play with them, you rate them, you make them into a book, you make a website, you do a slideshow. There's a billion different things you can do here. And then only once you're like, okay, I'm happy with this, do you then export it out of Lightroom. And it's kind of like opening the door to the darkroom and coming out and handing it to someone. Does it become a real tangible thing? So everything in Lightroom and Lightroom Classic is something called non-destructive editing, which means you can always, I'll just take Yvonne's picture here. And if I crop this, let's just say I cropped it, okay? And don't worry how I'm doing this right now because I'm going fast, but it doesn't matter. But if I crop this and I screwed it up, okay? I can always go back. The original is always there underneath. Nothing ever is saved. Everything's saved automatically. You never have to hit save. It's basically impossible to screw anything up. You can't muck it up because you can always go back. There's actually on the left-hand side here, there's an audit history trail of everything that you can do. Carrie, go for it. You got a
Can
question?
you just look in the app store? Like I
Yeah,
only see
let me show you where it is. Good question.
Okay.
So hold on, let me share my whole screen so you can see everything. 1 second. So when you download or when you signed up for Adobe, let's share my whole screen. When you signed up for Adobe, okay, you should see at the top of your screen up here a little sign that looks, and if we're in the way, you can move it, but a little sign that looks like an infinity symbol like that. That's called the Creative Cloud. If you don't see it, you'll have to go to your Finder down here. You'll have to go to Applications, and you should see here the one that says Adobe Creative Cloud. And once you've opened it once, it will take you to here. And that infinity should come up at the top.
Okay, weird. So when just downloaded Lightroom, so I don't have
Okay.
Adobe Creative
So,
Cloud. I
so,
have.
so how about do this, Carrie? So if you, I'll just open a new window here. So just go download Adobe Creative Cloud because you paid for it.
Okay.
And then I would go here. Just going to walk it through for everyone on the recording. And then you'll have to sign in and then it will let you download it.
Okay.
And what that will, hold on everyone 1 sec. Let me just finish this off for everyone on the recording. So that will you'll end up with something like this. Okay.
Okay.
Now you won't have all these apps because I have tons of creative and designer apps on here, but you'll have some of them. But if you only see LR, look, you can see there, you see it says Lightroom Web. That's the light version. That's the one we've got on our phones and our iPads. This is the mothership. This is the one we want. If you go to apps and you only have Lightroom, for example, you can actually just click on photo up here at the top, and this will show you all the photography apps. This is every app that's relevant to photography. And I know, for example, Cookie's not here today, but Cookie asked a question, or I think she said there was going to be a lesson taught in the fall on this thing called Photoshop Express. Now, that again is like a very, very, very slimmed down version of Photoshop specifically designed for people's phones, which some people like, some people don't like. Like Carol doesn't like doing that. She likes editing on her computer. I'd rather edit on my computer, so I'd rather have the big Photoshop and be able to do it on my computer. But in truth, what's kind of interesting is once you download this Lightroom Classic, is editing in photography used to be a whole song and dance between toggling between these two programs, Lightroom and Photoshop. And about 50% of what we ever wanted to do, we had to jump to Photoshop, and then we had to, and they're designed to talk to each other. So you open in one and then you save it and it saves back in the other. But as photography has become more and more popular, and in the industry, we call you guys prosumers. So as prosumers have started to want to understand and do more with their photography, Adobe has moved more and more of the tools that used to just live in Photoshop into Lightroom to mean we don't have to keep on coming out of it. For example, I don't know if I ever wanted to remove something from a picture. Up until about a year and a half ago, I always had to go to Photoshop. Now, if I'm like, I don't like this wagon back here and I want to remove it, and I'll do this kind of fast, but you'll get the idea. I want to remove this wagon and I just draw around it. It's gone. I never used to be able to do that in Lightroom. I used to have to, that was a whole class of me having to show people how to do that in Photoshop. Notice though, the original, that's always there. Now, it hasn't done a great job because I did it quickly, but it's just one example of the many tools where this Lightroom Classic really is designed to become your one-stop shop for everything you'd want to do with photography and video. Lots of people show video and they want to put video in here. But for the purpose of this class, oh, there's your yellow house, Yvonne. That's the same yellow house.
Yeah, it's my next door neighbor.
Yeah, I recognized it from the previous pictures. So yeah, in terms of any questions, as I said, I don't want to dwell too much on Lightroom and Lightroom Classic today, just because I know that lots of people on this recording don't or have no interest or aren't using their computers to do their editing. But for those of you who are, download Lightroom Classic, reach out to me. We can arrange either a one-on-one class or a group class where I can kind of give you a tour of Lightroom Classic, show you how to do it, get you started. Because it's a whole, especially if you're using your camera carry, there's really a whole protocol in terms of how do you get the photos off the camera into Lightroom, organize them, figure out which are the good ones, figure out which are the bad ones, delete the bad ones, edit them. And then once you've edited them, you've then got to get them out of Lightroom. You've got to export them out of Lightroom. And once you learn that flow, it's very easy. But it's a little tricky at the beginning to figure it out because it's a brand new program. Okay, that makes sense to everyone. Good. So yeah, to summarize, the reason I pushed the other Lightroom on everyone last time was because everyone's on a phone and I can't get this on your phone. And I wanted you to be able to change the shutter speed. So for example, here we can see like up here, we're going to look today. Here's Yvonne's shutter speed. So that's the shutter speed, 1/250th of a second. Yvonne, can you remember, did you change it on purpose?
I think I changed it several, but I don't know if I changed it on the series of photos because I was trying to get different things and there wasn't much action. Only I was trying to get her to move. So
Yeah. And
you
you've,
know.
I think you have changed it because I don't think the iPhone would have taken the picture like this to begin with. But you've used no, I wouldn't say fast. You've used I mean, it's fast because it's 1/250th of a second, but it's not crazy fast compared to what your camera or your phone can go to, which is like 1/4000th of a second. And if you look carefully, look at the dog. So she's kind of frozen, but look at her legs. If I'm
She's kind of fuzzy
Well, she's fuzzy. She's fuzzy because of yeah,
because of bad haircut.
other. Well, yeah, it's fun. Out of interest, did she used to be much darker?
Um, Not really. I mean, the whole thing is kind of faded because it was, I don't know why it was.
No, the reason I ask is I have a poodle breed, and my dog used to be basically the color of Carrie's hair, and
Oh,
and
yes.
now he's a sheep. Now he is totally white in like
I
40,
have
and it's the poodle. Apparently, the poodle gene they lighten as they get older.
I
Maybe
have a golden doodle too. And I got him so I could have a redheaded son because I have three girls, no redheads. And now he's a blonde too. He's
oh,
like
Yeah. My
totally
dog.
faded.
yeah, she was very apricot-y when we got her, which I love the color of, like strawberry
Yeah,
blonde.
it's funny. And my dog's real brother, he was like a dark chocolate brown, and he's also now a sheep. So yeah, they lighten over time. But point being here, you did a really nice job, Yvonne,
Oh,
of
okay.
freezing him, but I think you could have gone further. So if you go back to my useful shutter speed table that I showed you,
Mhm.
useful shutter speed table said anything
It's-
faster. There we go. Exactly. Look at it. Look where I've gone. Anything faster than 1/500 is really what you need. And you'll see people
oh,
did this in other ones, is what you need to freeze motion. And as you get faster, so this is getting faster from 1/500 to 1/4000, the reason you would need faster is because the thing is moving quicker. So the faster the thing moves, the faster the shutter speed you need to freeze it, if that's what you're trying to do. Remember, we can also, you'll see Carol sent in a very nice photo showing motion. We'll have a look in a minute. But the only problem with using very fast shutter speeds, as Carrie correctly answered earlier, is it doesn't let in much light.
oh,
So the camera has to do a lot of work to try to compensate for the fact that you've gone. So it's a lot easier, and this is a good point to remember. It's a lot easier to use fast shutter speeds when you are in good light. So on a bright sunny day, it's way easier to get a good fast shutter speed picture than if you try to do it inside. if your dog was running inside and it was 9 o'clock at night and you tried a fast shutter speed, your camera's going to hate you because there's not as much ambient light available. And even in this picture, you're in, it's a sunny day, but you're not in the sun. You're in the shade. And the reason it's gone kind of a little bit pixelated, it looks, this is what we call, this is noise. This is digital noise. Because the camera has had to try and like artificially brighten it. And I'm not going to go too much into what noise ISO is today, because actually I should do, because you can change it on your thing. I'll explain it in a minute. But the camera has basically had to make some adjustments, Yvonne, because you chose to use a fast shutter speed. Now, I'd still take the fast shutter speed and the frozen dog and a bit of graininess, because I can get rid of that in Lightroom afterwards when I learn how to do it, than the whole dog being blurry. Because if you blurred the dog, you could never get it back. And if you don't choose the right shutter speed, the dog will always be blurry. And here, Yvonne, you're 90% of the way there. I just would have wanted you to go a little bit quicker. Okay. Also, it's kind of interesting because your dog's like running this way, right? Mm-hmm. If she had been running across this way, I've mentioned this before, but if you imagine, I'm just going to reiterate because this is quite important for the group. Your dog is my finger. If my finger moves at this pace, then it stays in the frame for the whole time. If my finger moves at the same pace but goes like this, it's in and it's out. So it's much harder. Stroke, we need faster shutter speeds when things are moving laterally across our frame. When, like if you went on a road and you were photographing cars, and you're like, let's say you're standing on a bridge on top of the highway, the cars are coming towards you like this. It's pretty easy to freeze them. If you stand on the side of the highway and the cars are going, ooh, 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 then it's much, much harder. You need a faster shutter speed. So this is a really nice picture, everyone. I'd probably crop it a little bit. I don't think you need all that negative space at the top. I'd probably bring it down and crop it down to your dog to like something like this. And I'd even be tempted, maybe because the dog is facing this way, I want to like put it on that side of the frame.
Take out my garage there. That's the carport.
But that graininess, in fact, I'm going to talk about this now because I think it's important. That graininess is as a result of something called, so I mentioned this already to Carrie. In photography, we have something called the exposure triangle, which is whether you're using a webcam, a camera, an iPhone, it doesn't make a difference. Every single photo you ever take is a combination of three variables: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Those three. And the prime job of each one of these is to control. So this is your photo in the middle. The prime job of each one of these is control how much light gets to your camera. How bright is your picture? So shutter speed's primary job is when we have a fast shutter speed. Carrie, I'm going to test you again. Not much light or a lot of light? Not much light, you got it. So low light. So fast shutter speed and slow shutter speed lets in more light. That's its prime job. Its prime job is all to do with brightness. But it has, as I mentioned last time, what's called a creative side effect. It does something else to your picture. And the something else that it does to your picture is it controls movement. How movement's seen. That's the creative side effect of shutter. Aperture, don't worry about for the time being, because I'm not going to talk about it because it's very hard to do it, to change it on an iPhone as much as if you had a camera. But I am going to talk about, which I haven't talked about so far in this, with this group, something called ISO. If you go into your Lightroom app, the three of you can open your Lightroom app again for me. And if you go to take your photo, so you go down to the little blue camera. So make sure you're in Lightroom. Down at the bottom, there's device, Lightroom community. Make sure you're clicked on Lightroom. Click on the little camera. Make sure to the left of where you take the picture, it says Pro, not Auto. Let me know when you're all there. I don't want to jump ahead. Okay, Carrie's there. Yvonne, you there?
Well, how do you get from the Okay. So it's right under auto. Last night I was on it doing the pro thing, but
I want you to click on auto and change it to pro. Make sure it's on pro.
and then where do I see pro?
Just to the left of the button you use to take the is if
Oh,
you're taking a picture.
AWB?
Uh,
I thought I saw pro last night.
you're already on pro if you can see AWB.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Carol, you there?
ISO auto? Is
Yes,
that
yeah, exactly. Good. So you're jumping one ahead, exactly. You'll see next to the SEC, which is the shutter speeds that we were talking about last time. You have where you see where it says ISO auto. And if you click on that, you're going to get a slider. And you can see if you slide it all the way to the right, you're going to see if you look at the top of your phone, you're going to see a number going up. It's going to be in yellow. It's going to go in the iPhone, I think, depends on what you have, but it'll probably go all the way to 6400. And it'll go all the way down to like 100. Everyone see that?
I'm sorry. Let's see. So I'm sorry. At the
So
where?
go as if you're going to take a photo, Yvonne.
Yeah,
Okay. And
I got it
then,
on AWB.
okay, come off that.
Turn off that. Okay. Turn off that. Okay.
Okay. There's a big gray circle where you're going to take the picture.
Yes.
Okay. To the left of that, what does it say?
HDR.
Okay. Change that to pro. You're on the wrong play. You're on the wrong thing. Saying it to
Oh, there you
professional.
go. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, you're fine. And then you'll see that you have the SEC, which is the shutter speed.
Right.
And you have this thing on the right, which says ISO, one to the right of it. I'm gonna pull up a little thing that I
Oh, I
think.
see. And then they have the slider.
And then you have the slide that you've got it. Stay there. I'm gonna explain what ISO is for the benefit of everyone on the group. I'm gonna do it by showing you a little slide. Let me find this. Okay. So did any of you ever shoot with a film camera? No?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yes.
As a kid.
it's all right.
In college.
Yes, let me share my screen again with you guys. Okay, so I'm gonna just show you this to explain ISO. Okay, so if you ever used a film camera, you used to have to go out and buy a roll, and if you use a film camera now, you'd have to go out and buy a roll of film, and the roll of film would have an ISO number on it. We call it an ISO speed, but generally what that meant was the how sensitive was the piece of film that you were photographing with to light. So if I knew I was going to photograph in a dark church, a wedding, I would need to go out and buy a piece of film that had a higher number than if I was going out and photographing on a bright sunny day. It would basically cheat the camera to think it's brighter than it really is, which lets me use, for example, a faster shutter speed. Otherwise, my pictures would just be all black. So in film days, ISO used to refer to how sensitive our piece of film was to light. The problem with that was we were stuck with like 24 or 36 or however many rolls you had in your film. And you could only use that ISO. So if I suddenly went from inside the church to outside of the church, I was screwed because I basically have to open up my camera and change the roll of film. So with a digital camera, and this is true for a phone and it's true for any digital camera, is ISO now refers to how sensitive your digital sensor is to light. And your digital sensor is where your picture is created. It's if I chopped open our iPhone and I looked in behind these three lenses, you would see a sensor. Same as if I took a camera, here's my camera, okay? And if I took my camera and my shutter speed is right here, here's my shutter, it's like a pair of curtains. And the light's coming through here. So the quicker or slower I open or close the curtains, the more light gets in. Behind the shutter, right at the back of your camera, here is the sensor. And this is like the most important part of your camera. That's where the picture's actually created. So the primary job of these things is to control how much light, how bright or dark the sensor is, which makes or determines how bright or dark our photo is. Now, because we can now artificially or digitally change this, it's become much easier to shoot in a lot of different situations without our pictures getting really dark or really bright. So this one's easy to understand, much easier than shutter speed or everything. The lower the number, the less sensitive your sensor is to light. The higher the number, the more sensitive it is to light. When you slide that ISO slider up in Lightroom and you slide it up to a high number, you are making your camera more sensitive to light. I like to use the analogy sometimes for ISO. People find it easy to understand. Imagine inside your camera, you had a light dimmer switch and you could turn the dimmer up. That's higher ISOs. Or you could turn the dimmer. It's just inside your camera. You've got like a dimmer switch, but you can turn the dimmer down. High ISOs goes from like 200, 400, 600, 800, 1000 as we make it brighter. Low ISOs, we're turning the dimmer switch down. 400, 200, 100, 64, 32. There's a whole load of numbers that take you down there.
So when would you want to use a higher
I'll tell you right.
number?
It'll make sense in a minute. Hold on. Stick with me and I'll explain it. So I'm going to come back to your question, Carrie, in like 2 minutes. Okay. So the primary job of ISO, like with shutter speed, is to control how much light gets to your camera. How bright or dark your picture is. So 100 equals low sensitivity, 6400 equals, and the iPhone in Lightroom, you can go all the way up to 6400, which is why I've got that there, equals high sensitivity, lets in more light. Now, the problem, and we just saw this in Yvonne's picture, is like everything else, ISO has a creative side effect. It does something to your picture, as well as just making it brighter and darker. And if you imagine we had, if this was, I'm going to draw this actually out for you. Let me just put this in my iPad. If we had a camera sensor, so let me just draw the sensor here. Here's the camera. So here's your camera sensor. And what happens when you take a picture, you don't realize this happens, but like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of little tiny pixels are created. They're like little electrons when you press the button. The process, and this is kind of a simplified version, but when you take a picture, what happens is all these they smash against each other. They hit against each other. So you imagine there's all these little circles and they're all buzzing around and they all hit against each other. When they hit against each other, they create heat. And that heat that they creates something which is usually not wanted, which is something called digital noise, which you can see here on the orange on the right. Because what happens when you turn, this is a bit of theory for you guys, when you turn the ISO up, you create more of those electrons, therefore more of them buzz around and collide against each other, and more heat is created. And you get this thing called digital noise, which generally we don't want, because digital noise makes your photo look less sharp. We just saw this in Yvonne's picture. That was noise, Yvonne, when you said it looks grainy. And it makes the picture look less sharp. It reduces something called the dynamic range. It basically means you see less light, you see less color. Now, there's tons of ways that we can get rid of it afterwards. So it's not the be all and end all, but I really like to get things as close as we can correct in camera. So the general rule of thumb is that if we can, we always keep our ISOs at a very low level. And Lightroom, the app on your phone, does this automatically for you. So does if you're just photographing normally through the iPhone, it generally tries to keep you at a low ISO, especially on the iPhone compared to a camera, because if you imagine the iPhone sensor is teeny weeny weeny, it's small. Your Carry's digital DSLR sensor is much bigger. So it has more room for those electrons to hit around without creating as much heat. They don't collide as frequently. So like the iPhone is notoriously bad for creating digital noise, just because it's a phone, so it only has a tiny little camera. So now it's got a lot better in the last 10 years, but it's still not great. So sometimes here's an example, like we use noise because we want to be artistic and we want the grainy look. Like a lot of people come to me and they're like, Adam, I really want to recreate like the look of a film camera. If you go to any photography exhibition, Carrie and Yvonne asking you all to pull out an old film shot for you that was taken 80 years ago, 100 years ago, you will always see noise in those pictures because the technology was not as sophisticated and it was shooting onto a roll of film where you're going to see, especially usually noise shows up in two places. It shows up in the shadows of pictures. You see it more in the darks. You can see that down here, how it's more obvious in the darks. And here, it just looks more spotted than it does up here. And you see it in solid swathes of color. So for most people, this is usually a big blue sky. People see noise a lot in a big blue sky. Or if you took a picture of me and I was wearing a bright red t-shirt and you photograph me at a high ISO, you're going to see a lot of noise on that t-shirt. So noise is generally unwanted. Now, to Carrie's point, why would we then lift up the ISO if we always know that when we lift up the ISO, we're getting this negative effect of using noise? The key is that imagine, let's use Yvonne's example. Imagine Yvonne wants to photograph her dog inside and the dog's running. If she wants to get above that 1/500th shutter speed, somewhere between the 1/500th and the 1/4000, unless she turns the ISO up, the picture will be totally dark. Because remember, we're like turning the dimmer switch up inside the camera. We're cheating the camera to think that it's brighter than it really is. So whenever you're in any type of like inclement lighting environment, inside a church, a restaurant, Carrie, you could be photographing your girls at twilight and they're running up and down in the backyard and you're like, oh, I really want to be able to freeze them. But I know my like non-negotiable is I have to get to a relatively fast shutter speed. By turning up the ISO lets you do that. Otherwise, your shutter speed, if you're photographing your girls, Carrie maybe at like 1/10 of a second and your girls are a blur. That's just one use case. There's loads of examples, but that's one use case. And generally a big selling point from manufacturers when they try to sell you a camera is you'll often see, and the iPhone push this as well. Apple say this every time a new iPhone comes out. They'll say better low light performance. That's the terminology they'll usually use, or they'll say increased low light performance. What that means in plain English is that you can turn the ISOs up to a higher level without creating as much noise. So like my camera, okay, now obviously I'm a professional, so I have a good camera. My camera can comfortably go up to like ISO 5,000 without digital noise being an issue. Carrie's 15-year-old Canon camera can probably only go up to about ISO 800 without noise becoming an issue. The Hubble telescope that's going around in space and taking pictures can go up to like ISO like 800,000 without noise becoming an issue. And it's all to do with the size of the sensor. So the Hubble telescope has a sensor that's like the size of the front of your house. It's enormous, which means it can capture more light without noise being an issue. My camera has a pretty big sensor, but it's a big, bulky camera. And what's happened over time is Technology is getting better and better and better, and they're packing better low light performance into smaller sensors. So the whole new genre of cameras that came out about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, called mirrorless cameras, which was like the next step from a DSLR because it took out the mirror. And the cameras became like 40% lighter and smaller, which is what most people wanted because they didn't want to lug around a heavy lens, is those have better low light performance, i.e. we can turn the ISO up to a higher level without our picture looking grainy. And this is why, like, I think I mentioned this in the group last time, and I don't know whether you guys have this down in like Georgia, but at least I know when I'm driving around San Francisco, there's they have billboards everywhere that say like shot on iPhone, and it's like a ginormous billboard of like, I don't know, a ballerina doing a twirl or a shark in a shark tank or whatever it may be. And you're like, wow, that looks really good. If you look really carefully, it looks really good because they've lit it so that it's shot in really good light. The iPhone is amazing. The iPhone, if I took an iPhone and I took almost my camera and I wasn't trying to do anything special, in really good light, the pictures would not, to someone who's not a professional, you'd hardly be able to distinguish the difference. But the minute the light becomes bad, i.e. dim, like the capabilities of a camera compared to an iPhone go like this. But what's kind of nice, and the reason I'm explaining this and telling you, is if you use the Lightroom app to take your pictures. So let's just all open up go back to the Lightroom app again. And let's imagine we had a hummingbird in our backyard. So I want you to put the SEC, the shutter speed, slide it up to like 1/4000. Go all the way up. And what you're going to see is your picture is going to get darker. Or it depends if you've got your ISO on auto. If you've got your ISO on auto, you may not see it get darker. But it should get darker. So you're going to slide to the left. Okay, and the more you slide, the darker you should see the picture going as that number gets higher. And in fact, your Lightroom typically lets you get it all the way to 1/10,000. Okay. Then if you hit the one next to it that says ISO, if you take it off auto, your picture's probably going to go totally dark. But as you slide the ISO up, you're going to get brightness back in your picture. Now, you may not get enough brightness. It depends how dark the room is you're in which case you may have to slow the shutter speed down. And in all honesty, you would never need 1/10,000. But if you put the shutter speed at like 1/4000, you'll see that you'll be able to, it's kind of like a set of weighing scales. Like as we adjust one, we adjust the other. Now, your phone's always been doing that automatically without you thinking. But as we take more control, so we lift the shutter speed up, make it faster, lets in less light. We usually have to complement that by turning up the ISO, turning up the dimmer switch. Can you all see that? Can you see as you change it, the light's playing around? And it's quite nice on the iPhone because it lets you see it in real time, how it changes. But that's one use case. Another use case could be that we want to do the opposite. We want to show motion, but it's really, really bright outside. We're standing next to a waterfall, but it's in the bright sunshine. So I have to slow my shutter speed down because I want to create that soft, silky effect. So I take on my phone and I take the shutter speed down and I go from 1/50th to 1/40th to 1/30th to 1/20th, maybe to 1/10th. 1/10th. Like that. Oops. Sorry, that's a bad color for you guys to see. 1/10th. Now, when you do that, Carol, are you letting in more light or less light with the slower shutter speed?
Shutter speed, more light.
Good. So you're letting in more light. Now, the problem is if it's really bright, your picture, you could let in so much light, your camera's like, uh-oh, I've let in so much light, the picture's just going to go white. It's going to get overexposed. Use a photography analogy, or the photography term, we say it's blown out, which means it's too bright. In that case, it's the opposite of what I just showed you. You would take the ISO down.
Yeah.
So you cheat the camera to think it's darker. I turn the dimmer switch down on the camera to make the camera think it's darker than it really is, which lets me get down to the slower shutter speeds without my picture becoming overexposed. Now that's some heavy theory for the three of you. Does that all make sense? You need me to go repeat that?
Would you get better color by doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So generally, when you slow down your shutter speed, open the curtains up and you go, like in all this time when the curtains are open, I'm getting more light into the camera. More light equals more of this word you've heard me talk about a lot throughout these lessons, more dynamic range, which means the range of light the camera can see between the darkest of the darks and the lightest of the lights. When you let in more light, Yvonne, and you let in more dynamic range equals more color. It equals more contrast. It equals more clarity. I showed you guys the Northern Lights last time.
Right.
I said the Northern Lights in real life don't look like this. They're bright, but they're not this bright. And it's because the slower we open the shutter speed, the more light we let in, the brighter, the more vivid, the more contrasty, the more clarity that you have in your image. And one thing that's kind of interesting that noise does when you increase your ISO, and again, not to go too theoretical on this, but what noise does is if you imagine your picture, let me just get rid of this on for a sec. So if you imagine go away. So when you create a picture, you have all these nice, hard, round pixels. They look like this. If we put like your sensor under a microscope, and these should all be exactly the same size, but you get the idea. So you have these nice, hard, round pixels contained within each pixel. Each individual pixel has your camera's full dynamic range. And this doesn't matter if you're shooting on an iPhone or you're shooting on a normal camera. So each pixel contains maximum dynamic range, which means equals more light, more color, like more sharpness. Okay. When you increase the ISO, which sometimes we have to do, it's unavoidable because we need it. And as I say, especially in the digital world, there's tons of ways that we can get rid of it afterwards. But if I increase the ISO, okay, which equals increased noise, the theory of what actually happens is those nice hard round pixels become like weird and wonderful shapes. They go like this. The best way to think about noise, if you like doing DIY or anything, is it's like taking our pixels, our nice hard pixels, and it's like getting a piece of sandpaper and it sands away the edges of the pixels. So rather than being nice, hard, and round, they're still all joined together, but they all go these like weird and wonderful, like irregular shapes. Now, what that means is then if I go back, hopefully my colors help this make it easy to understand. When I go back and I look at the dynamic range in each pixel, Yvonne, what's happened to the dynamic range? Has it got bigger or has it got smaller?
Smaller.
Got it, exactly. So increased noise equals decreased dynamic range. And decreased dynamic range equals less light, less color, less sharpness. Should say color, sorry. Color. There we go. That makes sense?
Yeah.
That's the theory. That's what's actually happening behind the scenes. And the better the camera, the better the phone. Like if I took an iPhone 16 and I took an iPhone 10, the biggest leaps that you see generally in terms of technology on an iPhone is the ability to be able to shoot in lower light without creating as much noise. But still, it's not great. Like if you're in a dark environment and your iPhone will say, hold still, hold steady, hold steady. That's because it realizes it doesn't want to push the ISO up too much. But in order to get a picture that looks like your eye sees it, it needs to slow down the shutter speed to let in more light. But remember, when we slow down the shutter speed, we can't really handhold the camera because the shutter speed is too slow and it's going to pick up on our hand moving, which is why you have to use a tripod. Yeah, Yvonne, you're on mute, but just take yourself off mute and then I can hear you.
Unmute. Am I on mute? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. So I tried to use this tripod that also has an attachment for, the camera, but it was awkward because you really couldn't see. You just have to kind of do this, and it was like it was awkward.
As in, it was awkward to compose and get your pictures.
Well, just getting it, your camera where it wasn't like bumping up against the thing, holding it, and then you're like looking, and I'll master that in another class as the tripod.
Yeah, it depends what tripod you've got.
Right.
And for full candidacy, the tripods for iPhones, there's a lot of rubbish ones out there that you can buy on Amazon for like $5 and they're useless because they just fall over or it doesn't hold the camera. So there's and I've already sent, I think I sent this group.
Yeah, that one was my camera was too heavy for that little one, the bendy one.
So that one is just for an iPhone.
Yeah, but I mean, for my iPhone, maybe my case was too heavy. But I do have some other ones for cameras that have the little attachment that you can put on.
Yeah,
so I'll try those.
And generally, tripods, well, it depends when you get used to them. But at the beginning, tripods make you less fluid and flexible. Like, so if I was taking a picture of a rose and I'm just hand holding the picture, I can move all the way around the rose and I can very easily go above it and below. When you're on a tripod, you're kind of stuck. You can go a little bit up, a little bit down, but you got to pick up the tripod and move it around. So changing perspective is much harder on a tripod, at least at the beginning. But you only need a tripod for you guys at this stage when you are using slower shutter speeds. When you want to show movement, there's no other reason for you to need a tripod at the moment. But to come back to this, which is really important to understand, sometimes we have no choice but to increase the ISO and create. And again, as I say, if you went to an exhibition of photography and it was like, I don't know, from a 50s jazz club and it was a photographer who was taking pictures of performers, if you look carefully, all of those pictures are going to have tons of noise in them because the photographer had to keep the shutter speed high to get the person playing the saxophone sharp. But at the same time, if they had to increase the ISO to let them do that. And if they hadn't have done that, they would have had to use a slower shutter speed, which would have meant the performer would have been blurry. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Take a picture of this one if you didn't get it, because this is kind of useful. But I think that's a good diagram to help understand it. So in general, very important, and you'll hear this, not just me, but other photographers, but anytime I'm teaching, you'll always hear me talk about dynamic range. So I'll just define this. So this is dynamic range. And generally in photography, we always want to go, let's go all this here. So we'll go more impact photos equal more dynamic range. This is true for so many things, but like, for example, a black and white, when you take a photo black and white, you want to have you convert it in Lightroom. You want to have a big dynamic range. You want to be able to, the more range we see from shadows to highlights, from shadows, so shadows is the dark parts, highlights is the bright parts. The more we see, so this equals better photo than this, whether this is the shadows and this is the highlights. And a lot of this, to be able to get better dynamic range, is just you understanding where the light's coming from. Time of day, like you get a great dynamic range in those first 4 hours, last 4 hours of the day that you've heard me talk about a lot. but it's something that we're always striving for when we're looking at light, is how can we capture the full spectrum? Now, better cameras make that easier because they have larger dynamic ranges kind of built in. But you can do it on anything. So to come back how we got here to ISO, generally, rule of thumb is we're going to avoid shooting at high ISOs. But there's some use cases of which, like Yvonne's was a perfect one here with the dog. Let me just reshare the screen. There we go. So Yvonne's was a perfect use case here where her camera, you didn't even know this was happening, Yvonne, but your camera pushed up the ISO. That is noise. Okay. Whereas if we look at the next picture, for example, which,
Ooh,
let me find one that was showing good light. Let's look at Carol's one. This is yours, Carol, right?
wow.
Yeah, which is great. Now, it was relatively bright when Carol shot this. Plus, she used a slow shutter speed. Let's have a look at her shutter speed. Let's have a look at her shutter speed. Okay. So her shutter speed was like 1/25 of a second, which meant the fan was going, but she managed to get this lovely motion in it. But the center of the fan was totally frozen. Carrie, why is the center of the fan frozen?
She locked. Well, it's not really moving that much, right?
It's
And
not,
she
yeah.
probably locked in on it.
That's the key, is that it's not moving. It's that the blades of the fan are moving at probably 10 times the speed of the middle of the fan. So we see the motion there, but this is sharp. Now, out of interest, Carol wasn't controlling this here, but the iPhone was doing it for her. Look what happens to the ISO. It's really low because it didn't need to go high. And therefore, this picture, if you compare it to, Yvonne's picture, where the ISO had to go higher, let's just compare them next to each other. Okay. Let me just zoom in. Look at the difference. So Carol's just looks cleaner. It looks sharper. It looks crisper. There's still a little bit of ISO there, a little bit of noise, but you can see, especially on Yvonne's one, this is all noise. This is like, and especially you see it in the dog a lot because we're sanding away the pixels. So we're losing some of that sharpness in the dog. And this is as you become better and better and better, you take more control of your iPhone or you take more control of your camera because you know what these different things do and you know when you need to use them, when you don't need to use them. The iPhone doesn't care. The iPhone just wants you to get a picture that is the correct brightness. See that? Can you all see the difference there? Yvonne, you have a question.
Yeah, Carol, did you just hold that while you were doing it, or did you put it on a tripod?
I just held it.
Yeah. So
Daddy.
Carol probably would have taken that picture 5 times if she would have done. Maybe 3 out of 5, the middle of the fan would have been sharp. So if we want to guarantee that they're all going to be sharp, we would have put it on a tripod. But again, the what's called the image stabilization, how slow you can take the shutter speed on an iPhone has got pretty good. That if this Carol had taken it down to like, I don't know, 1/2, she would have had to use a tripod. It would have been a non-negotiable. There would have been no way to take this picture without it. But here you're kind of in the zone where you're like, I can kind of get away with it, but maybe if I took 10 pictures, 5 would be sharp, 5 would be a little bit blurry, just depending on how fast my hand's moving. Remember, my general rule of thumb is 1/50th is the cutoff to hand holder camera. If you want to get 10 out of 10 sharp. So Carol's gone below there, which is fine. And a really nice job, Carol, of taking this. It's a very simple picture, but effectively done. Carol, I probably would have moved the composition maybe a little bit, either create something a bit more abstract and artistic, maybe like that. I may even have, I don't have enough room to do it here. I may even have put it up on the top right, may have been a bit somewhere like this, like that, to not have all that dead space. But it just shows like just playing with shutter speed, you can create something like it looks very three-dimensional, this picture. Like even this, like the cord hanging down is kind of interesting to add depth. But undoubtedly well done, Carol. This is like if I said to my 4-year-old, take a picture of the fan, she's going to take a picture of a fan. It's not going to look nearly as creative as this. It's just going to have like a picture of a fan with the blades frozen. This straight away, we're creating something artistic out of a pretty mundane subject. So really well done. That's very, very good. And you took that in the Lightroom app, Carol.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Where you changed the shutter speed. So this was taking on board everything we learned in the last lesson. Very well done. Really good. Let's look at this one. So this one's kind of interesting. This, I can't remember, was this one of someone here? It may have been someone on the recording. I think it's someone on the recording. But this one is a slow, well, relatively slow shutter speed. And then the person's done one of either two things, and I don't know because they're not here. They're either moving in a car, which is why you're seeing all that motion, or they've purposely moved their hand when they've taken the picture. I think they've moved their hand, but I'm not sure. If you'd taken this picture and kept your hand steady, the photo would have been sharp. But by moving the hand, we create this kind of almost like, I don't want to make it too, if I make it too big, it's going to look blurry. Just because it was kind of, I think they sent it to me a bit blurry. But can you see how it looks like you get this very like ethereal look? It creates something like pretty artistic from a pretty park, but the things that are moving, remember in photography, it's all about how are we moving and how's the things that we're taking a picture moving. This tree was moving much faster than this tree, which is why you're seeing the motion so much more here. You're seeing the motion in the clouds over here more than you are here. So the tree was probably blowing a bit in the wind, this one at the top, but the person's moved their hand as well. And again, well done for taking down your shutter. Now, this is the opposite of kind of what we were talking about. Look, it's a bright sunny day. The shutter speed has been taken down. The ISO had to be kept really low because otherwise, if the ISO had gone high, the picture would have ended up looking like that. So the iPhone's done this for whoever took the picture, but eventually I'd love you guys to be able to control this all yourself. And it's kind of interesting because with like a group like this, as you get better and better and better, and we go back to our exposure triangle, we do aperture, shutter speed, ISO, is we focused a lot on just controlling this one, shutter speed, because it's the easiest one to be able to change on an iPhone. In time, especially like carry on your DSLR, when you just control the shutter speed, you're only using about 60% of what the camera can do. It has its uses, but there's a ceiling. The holy grail that I love to get everyone to eventually is where we are controlling all three. That's manual mode. In manual mode, you're using 100% of what your camera can do. And lots of people have great cameras and they're basically shooting with them on automatic. And you've heard me sometimes say the best camera is the 3 inches behind it. It's you, not the camera. So the more that we can take control of the camera, which I'm like gradually getting you guys to do a little bit more and a little bit more, the more we can take control of the camera, ultimately, the more intentional you can be. You can say, oh, I want to get this picture of my dog frozen and I want no noise or whatever. And you make those decisions before you take them. And that sounds like a lot when I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, got to think about the ISO and I got to think about the aperture and I got to think about the shutter speed. But over time, when you practice it, and I've had 20 plus years of experience of teaching people how to use cameras and phones, it becomes completely subconscious. You don't even think about it. It's like driving a car. It's completely instinctive. But it takes time. No, you can't just jump. I couldn't, if I jumped any of you to manual now, you're going to end up with pictures that are crazily bright, crazily dark, and you're going to have to really think about why that happened. Yeah, that's the holy grail, is to get you to manual. Nice job, whoever took this one. Very nice. Well done on the creative use of motion, which is, we've got the same here. Look at this one. This one. Now, this one's now we're starting to understand numbers. I can start showing you this. Just ignore that one for the time being. But look, this is 1/40th of a second with someone's hand moving of a flower. But it was obviously taken in a room that was pretty dark. So what's happened is the camera has had to increase the ISO to let us use this shutter speed. Otherwise, the shutter speed would have had to go even slower. It's a beautiful picture. Very nice job. Whoever took this, lovely crop. Well done filling the frame. But if I look closely, what do you think I'm going to see, Carrie, when I zoom in?
Noise.
You got it. There it is. So, but in this case, that was kind of unavoidable, because otherwise I couldn't have got this picture. And as I say, like, noise isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes we see it as like a creative thing. And also, I'll give you a little sneak preview. But in Lightroom, there's tons and tons of different tools we can use that get rid of the noise. Like, look at the difference in this. Okay, look. Yeah, my keyboard. Develop. Noise, no noise. Noise, no noise. See the difference?
Mm.
So I'm not so concerned about having to get up to high ISOs. I almost rather people use them if they need to, because I know on the computer afterwards now I can get rid of it. And it's really quick and really effective once you learn how to do, and again, it's kind of a whole lesson in itself, is how to do noise reduction on a photo. But the key is that the camera pushed the ISO up here because we were in low light to let us get this picture. This is great. I really like this picture. I think, again, I wonder what it would have looked like if we would have spun it around. It may have looked kind of interesting. Maybe not. Maybe I liked it how it was before. But very, very nice abstract. Was this one of your guys? No. Very well done, whoever took this. Very interpretive use of the theme that I gave. And create something that's very, very nice. I would have maybe this focal point, it's a bit in the middle, could have been pushed up or pushed down a little bit. It's a little bit on that middle horizon. I don't really have room to crop that, but just watch out for that. And if I have time today, I want to talk about one other compositional thing that will help you with that. Let's look at this one. Let's get Lightroom a bit bigger and get rid of all this clutter. Okay. So really nice waterfall. Let's look at the numbers, because now we know about numbers. So the shutter speed went up to 1/340. Pretty fast. That let in a lot of light or not much light, Carrie?
Not much.
Good. Now, in this case, it was really bright. The sun was on the waterfall, so the ISO could stay low. We didn't have to cheat the camera. We didn't have to turn the light dimmer switch up. Really nice job, whoever took this, on really starting to be able to freeze the water. But what's kind of interesting, and this generally happens when we photograph waterfalls, is different parts of the waterfall are moving at different speeds. So this part, which is kind of interesting, I kind of see a bird's face in there. Look at that. Yeah, it's like a crow, like a crow's head. Different parts of the water are moving at different speeds. The shutter speed that was used to capture this photo is not fast enough to freeze this. It's fast enough to freeze this and freeze this and freeze this and freeze some of this. But this bit that was going over the rocks, it didn't get. And the general rule of thumb when we photograph a waterfall, which is an incredibly popular thing to photograph to practice shutter speed, is we usually want to set our shutter speed to freeze the fastest moving thing. And that's not just true for waterfalls. That's carry if you're photographing your three kids and they're all running at different speeds. I want your shutter speed set to freeze the fastest kid. Because otherwise what will happen is the fastest kid will be a blur, kind of like this, and the other two will be sharp. So I would have loved for this shutter speed to go a little bit faster, somewhere between 1,500 and 1,000, which would have let in less light. So what do you think our ISO would have had to do? Our ISO would have had to increase to probably maybe 200 to get there. So we'd be at 1,500 to 1,000, ISO 200. That makes sense. Carol, was this your picture? I can't remember.
No, I did.
Someone from the recording. So one thing I'd also say, and maybe they just didn't want to get too close to the edge, is I don't think there's too much of this here. And maybe that's just a case of we didn't want to fall in the waterfall. But I definitely would have come 2 steps closer, taken out some of this foreground, just so we could see more inside that pond. What does everyone think? You think this is distracting, or you think it helps?
I like it.
It's in really nice light. I think it almost looks intentional because it looks like it's kind of leading you into the picture. I think definitely another way of doing this would have been to come closer here and to photograph it, then remove that and really make the photo about the frozen water. But to do that, we would have needed a faster shutter speed. That makes sense to you all now. You see how the numbers are starting to join together now that we've got an understanding of ISO and an understanding of shutter speed. Okay, so it's kind of interesting here. So it's a very similar picture of one, but the dog's legs almost, look at the difference. Look at the tail and the legs. If I look really closely, they're a tiny bit blurry. But the body is pretty sharp. That's because those back legs and the tail are moving quicker than the body. Cute picture. But can you see, look at the leg. You see how the leg's blurred? The back paw. But like your house and your neighbor's house and everything else is totally frozen. It looks great because it's not moving. So again, here I would have just opted for a little bit of a faster shutter speed. Again, I wouldn't have necessarily have on think what the reason why the sky is white here is because the dynamic range, the range between the darks and the lights, the dynamic range is too great here for your camera to capture. So this bit wasn't in real life bright white. I bet it was blue, but the camera can't get it because the dynamic range is too small.
So what should I have done?
Great question. It's a bit of a limitation on the iPhone. Okay. There's not much you can do. You could have put, if you would have put your square here, then that would have made the sky blue. But the problem is your focus point would not have been on your dog. So it would have helped the exposure, but it would have blown the dog. What it would have done is, I'll show you, if you would have put it here is the whole picture would have become, the dog would have ended up looking like kind of, there's nothing there, but it would have gone like that in your phone. I think what you could have done better, Yvonne, is you could have just, the easiest way to handle this is I just would have cropped out the sky. Doesn't
I was just trying to get her to go somewhere, so I was throwing the thing and trying to.
Yeah.
That would have been great.
But even afterwards, I just don't think we need all that sky out there. Also, again, hard when you're throwing things, but generally the direction that your dog is moving, I would have much rather that your dog was over here running into the frame than over here running, excuse my stick dog diagrams. But then over here, does that make sense?
Yes, that's a good point.
Okay, good. Let's go to the next one. Okay.
Ooh.
This one's really interesting. Now, this one, the water wasn't, again, I'm really talking about movement a lot because I think it's so relevant to like what we've been talking about the last. Look how this is so nicely frozen. Even up here, really nicely frozen. This is a really good filling the frame picture. I love how the foliage mirrors kind of the water trickling down. There's an S curve running through this picture. There's a leading line that there's the S curve. But again, if I'm putting my hypercritical judging hat on, I wish that this was just a little bit faster, the shutter speed. Just a little bit. It only needs to go a little bit more. You can see up here is frozen, but this water is moving quicker. Same down here. Look here. See it down there? It's kind of a blur. The bubbles and everything down here look great. Carol, sorry, you had a question.
Oh, no. So this is my picture.
Okay.
And again, I didn't have a tripod, but if I slowed the shutter speed more, the screen was totally white because I didn't yet know about the changing the ISO and
ISO,
camera, and I could
exactly.
have adjusted. So
You got it. So you couldn't now with what you know, you could be standing in front of this same waterfall and the shutter speed could be 1/20, which would have started giving you like that soft, silky look. And you could have just slid down your eye and then you would have just decreased your ISO.
okay.
Now, I will tell you, Carol, sometimes when something is in very bright light, like this, within really good light, it's sometimes almost impossible, even with a low ISO, to get down to the slow shutter speed without the picture becoming overexposed, without it looking like that. That's a limitation on an iPhone. That's a limitation on every camera on the planet. There's something actually that people buy. They get really into slow shutter speed photography, and you can buy something. You can Google it, but you can buy something called a neutral density filter. And what a neutral density filter is, the best way to describe it is it's like me getting a pair of glasses, but they're sunglasses. And it's like me putting a pair of sunglasses in front of the camera lens. So what that does is it cheats the camera to think it's darker than it really is, to let you get down to the slower shutter speed without the picture being overexposed. And these are really popular, like photographers use these the whole time to let them get, I'll show you an example. Let me give you a visual. So Carol, don't be alarmed if for some reason you're taking it and it's so bright, the waterfall. It's much easier to do a slow shutter speed picture in the shade. But you try and get your shutter speed down and you get it to a point and just it's so bright, even with your ISO down. And that's just a limitation of the camera. This is a neutral density filter. I'll just show you what it looks like. So it's literally just this thing that we screw on the camera. There's a good example. And it makes it think it's darker than it really is. So which lets you take like going from a picture like the one on the right to a picture like the one on the left.
So you can put that on an iPhone?
They make them for iPhones. Yeah, I'll show you that. There's some, again, I can send you, there's some really crappy ones and there's some good ones, but like you don't need to spend $130 on one, but like that's a really good one. But some people purely are so interested in just using their phones to do slow shutter speed photography. This is an essential, like you cannot get here. They're like, I couldn't get slower than this without the picture being too bright. The minute I cheat the camera and I stick this basically pair of sunglasses over the top of it, I can then get much more creative and I can slow down my shutter speed without the picture being overexposed. And again, there's ones, Yvonne, that run from like $5 you can buy on Amazon to ones that run to $150. In truth, you don't need the really top end ones, but there's a lot of rubbish ones. Um, I'll send out a recommendation of one of those just in case you want to get them. But again, and it carry like if it comes to like you got really into your camera, this is like a very, I'm just trying to find some loads of examples. I wrote a whole book on filters during COVID. But here, look, you can see the difference, right? So it allows us to get down to, let me see if I can find my book there, neutral density filter. So if I can get this in. Don't worry. But essentially, neutral density filters allow us to use slower shutter speeds without getting the photo overexposed. So sometimes we need them. So just Carol is a really good point, and sometimes there is a limitation. Another fan picture. Look at this one. This one's great.
Wow.
Really good. This one's a bit trippy. I'm trying to figure out like what you're looking at, all the lines. Like it's, I really like that. This one there's even more motion shown. Really nice job, Carol. It almost looks like it looks like the inside of a clock or like a spinning disc. I don't know. I just like the gold as well with the wood here, and how the fan is creating this kind of brownish hues. Again, you saw the crop I did there. I just moved it slightly away from the center. Shutter speed this time was much slower. It was 1/10 than your previous fan picture. If we look at both of them together, you can see how you can see much more movement in the one on the right than the one on the left. They're both good. It's just different. But really, really nice job on being able to show that motion, Carol. Very, very well done. Excellent. Really good. How long did it take you to get there, Carol? Did you get there in one attempt, or was that a lot of trial and
It was just one.
Great. That's good. That's what I want to hear. Really good. Really, really nice job. Let's look at this one. So this one is this is yours as well, Carol, I think. This one got a little bit pixelated when you sent it to me. But was this person spinning, dancing? What were they doing?
He was throwing like a
Oh, he's throwing
it's
that.
a Celtic festival, and they throw these big heavy things.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a
he's throwing.
contest.
He's spinning around and he's throwing this weight, right?
One guy actually his kilt flew off when
So hard for us to see here, Carol, because I just think the way that it's been sent, we lost some of the quality, but I'll make it a little bit smaller so we can hopefully see it a bit better. Just make it like that. In that you definitely along the right lines in that you sped up the shutter speed. I think you could have gone much more here, especially now with what you know about ISO. So this could have gone up to 1/1000. That would have frozen him better, but it would have made the picture darker. So all you have to do is you just have to increase the ISO to maybe 400. And on most of your iPhones, where you're really going to start noticing noise, now Carol's got an iPhone 13, which is going to be a bit different to like Carrie and Yvonne's iPhone 16. But most you start to notice on an iPhone, you start to notice noise at about 800 ISO and above. So that's when you've got to start being careful. But here you had tons of room to run. So I think you just could have gone with a tiny, tiny bit of a faster shutter speed. Any questions on any of that? Okay, good. Good. I'm pleased I've got time left. So I want to talk about, for the last 15 minutes or so, I want to talk about something that we haven't talked about before, and I want to push you guys forwards. We've talked a lot about the rule of thirds. And I feel like you guys have a good handle on it. The next step along from the rule of thirds, like when I'm teaching a group, one up is something called the golden ratio. You guys anyone heard of that before? Okay, Carrie's heard of it. Good. So this is a new thing I'm going to teach you to help you get better compositions in your pictures. I'm going to explain a little bit what it is, where it comes from, because it's quite nice to know. And then I'll show you how we use it. So the golden ratio, if ever you did math at school, there's something called the Fibonacci sequence. I've got it written down here, actually. I don't need to write it. The Fibonacci sequence basically is this like mathematical formula that people use to predict the stock market, and they use and like all kinds, and they see it in like ancient Roman ruins and all types of things. It pops up and again and again and again. And the way that we get the golden ratio is through this thing called the Fibonacci sequence, which is you write these numbers down. So you go 0, 1, and then you go 0 plus 1 equals 1. And then you take that number and then you add the previous number to it. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. 3, 2 plus 1 equals 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5. These numbers here are called the Fibonacci sequence. And you don't have to worry about this too much. I just like people to know where it comes from. So I just wrote down those numbers, and those go on and on and on and on. So look, I've just taken the previous number and I've added the total. So the next one from there would be 144 plus 233. Now what happens is if I take any of these numbers, and in this case I've taken 21 and 13, and I divide them by each other, I get this magic number 1.6153, and it goes on and on and on. But you can eventually think of it as 1.6. 1.6 to 1. This is the golden ratio. I mean, I could have taken two of the other numbers. I could have divided 144 by 89. It would always give me the same 1.6 number. Now, why is that relevant to photography? Because we can use this golden ratio to help us compose photos better. So I'm actually, let me just jump to this guy here. Okay. So here, this is just a frame in a picture. And this is split with the 1.6 to 1 ratio. And you see, and I put the Parthenon here because you see this happen again and again and again. So this is split 1.6 to 1. And then I use a different color. And then this is 1.6 to 1 cut off there. And I could show you any, like, I don't know, I could show you the Mona Lisa. I could show you the Colosseum. I could show you tons of things, and you'll see the golden ratio used again and again and again and again, because essentially what happens is you are dividing a frame into pieces. So I'm going 1.6 to 1, 1.6 to 1, 1.6 to 1, and I just keep on making it smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until I get something that looks like this. And again, I don't need you to worry about this too much. This is theory stuff I just like to show people just because it helps you understand in a minute. How is this relevant to photography? Well, if I take these rectangles and I continue making them smaller and smaller and smaller, and I divide my thing by 1.6 by 1.6 by 1.6 by 1.6, is I end up with this thing here. So this is 1.6 to 1, 1.6 to 1. And this we call the golden spiral. Some people call it the Fibonacci spiral, which is why it's useful to know that it comes from the Fibonacci sequence. And we see this again and again and again. You see it in nature. Here's a perfect golden, almost looks like I drew the golden ratio. 1.6 to 1. You see it in like conch shells a lot. When you see it in any, if you walk along the beach, you'll see it in shells a lot. It appears in nature again and again and again. The question is, how do we use it in photography? What do we want to do? And the key, and it's a little bit different to the rule of thirds, just a little bit. And it doesn't replace the rule of thirds. It's just a complementary compositional tool that I'm giving you, is that we want our subject ideally to live at the crescendo of that spiral, where it curves together. Look at this guy here. So here I put the rectangles on as well as the thing. But the positioning of the bird, Yvonne, this is kind of like what I was saying with your dog, is you see how the bird is looking into the frame. The bird's not over here looking out the frame. So just think about that when you're photographing moving things. But we want to make sure that our subject, whether it's a bird or Ansel Adams' mountain, is on the crescendo of that spiral. Now, unfortunately, there's nothing on the iPhone that puts this spiral up for you, like how I've got the grid for you. It doesn't exist. What is nice is when you start using Lightroom, is Lightroom has a whole suite of tools to help you compose with the golden ratio. So like there's the golden ratio on your doc. But I just wish it was on the other side. So I want you to start thinking about this because like look at this picture here of this surfer, right? Okay. He's on the golden ratio. There's a big argument that photographers make that says compared to the rule of thirds, okay, this picture is the same. I just took out the surfer on the bottom left. Carol, does the surfer look like he's moving faster on the one on the left or the one on the right?
Wow. I think he's moving faster on the left.
I'm gonna hide it and then I'm gonna bring it up quickly. Ready, steady, go. Which one's he moving quicker in?
I think faster on the left.
Yvonne, what do you think?
Right, because he's compared to the person swimming, it looks almost dangerous.
Which one? Well, left or right? Which one do you think he's moving faster?
I think on the right.
Harry, what do you think?
Right.
Yeah. So the general rule of thumb is that usually we provide more motion to a picture by using the golden ratio. It makes the photo feel more dynamic. This is exactly the same picture. The guy's moving at the same speed, but
Is it because it doesn't have anything to do with taking the guy out there?
yeah, kind of, but not really, because actually, I actually kept the guy in here on purpose because you'd think the guy would be distracting, but you don't get stuck at the guy because the golden ratio actually sweeps you past him.
Yeah.
So this guy, if this guy was here and he was on the rule of thirds, which maybe I should have done would have been a better example, but you would be really pulled between looking at him and looking at him. On this one, you kind of sweep straight. Now you've looked at it for too long. But when I pull it straight up, you get swept straight past him up here. Let me show you another one. Actually, this is a good one. Okay, so this is Henri Cartier-Bresson, one of the most famous street photographers that exists. Okay, look at the difference in this one and this one. Now this one's pulled more out, but this one feels like there's more movement to it. I think you land more naturally at him and his camera than you do here. But there's kind of like, oh my God, it's kind of like the rule of thirds pictures I showed you when I showed you the difference. There's a lot to look at. So there's an argument that the golden ratio does a few things, but I'm going to write them down for you. So the golden ratio A provides more motion, dynamism to frame. 2, I'll show you in a minute. 2 is it generally provides more context. Helps to tell a better story. You see more. I'll show you, look at this one. I threw tons of examples in here. I didn't know how much time I'd have, but look at this one.
Wow.
Okay. So there you get, and this one you kind of follow the sweep of the land, right? But the golden ratio is working to take you now. If this was rule of thirds, the sun would be like down here. It just wouldn't quite feel as dynamic. As I say, it's like when I teach this to people and they start to think about it, it generally takes your photography just like one notch up. I have to start with the rule of thirds because it's the easiest place to start, and every single camera on the planet has the grid. This, you got to think about it a little bit more. But here you can see there's a lot going on in this picture. But you very, very naturally land at the sun. Let's look at this one. Okay, very simple. Okay. So this just draws me through. I put here, use negative open space and or area. It's different. You can kind of ignore that. Don't worry about that too much for the time being. fact, I'll show you this one. And lots of people like to think of it as a number, and I teach it to people, sometimes think of it as a number 9. You have a number 9 in your picture, and that number 9 can be, it can be this way. It can be on its side like this way. It can be on its side like this way. But here, like, this is a great example where this is a very golden ratio picture where we follow the line of the food up to the main plate. And that's all being composed very intentionally. If ever you sit on any GCA things, like the Focus magazine thing that I know they just had and the various other contests, you'll often hear judges say strong use of the golden ratio, good use of golden ratio, or they'll even say composition could be more along the golden ratio, which means that like the picture was, let's just use an example. I'll cut this one up. I cut this picture and I kind of went like this. I just kind of stuck it in the middle. It's okay. It's pretty good. But I'm not creating something as dynamic. Spin it around here. And I don't really have enough to work with, but like this photo works the other way because you've got all the cups. Spin my golden ratio around. And that straight away is creating a much stronger sweep through my picture. So it's something that, and it all comes down to this 1.6 to 1. So like this one, I could chop it up and it's 1.6 to 1. There's a line. And then I go across here and I go 1.6 to 1. Here's a point. And then all I'm doing is I'm drawing lines and then I'm drawing them and then I'm joining them together to mean that things come to the crescendo of the spiral. And again, I don't really need you to worry about too much about the theory. I just think it's nice for people to know where it comes from. But this starting to use this golden ratio in your compositions and starting to think about it. And you see it a lot on landscape. I'm seeing I've got an example here. Yeah, so like I'll go back to this one. The rule of thirds, if we'd use the rule of thirds here, the horizon would be about here. So it's like just pushing it. It's like being a bit more artistic, pushing the sky right up to the top of the frame. Maybe it's the other way around, and maybe you're photographing an amazing sunset and you only have a very small slither of land. And then you have like a big booming sky. Bless you. All of that is going to be a way to be able to make your pictures stand out. And being able to use the golden ratio in tandem with the rule of thirds is a big start to be able to do that. Okay. Any questions?
Wow.
Yvonne, go for it.
I love this. It's very organic, and but I think about the thing you showed us where the famous photographer has everything in lines like this. It's
Oh yeah. And remember that all these things I show you don't mean you have to do them on every picture.
Mhm.
Remember, I love using the analogy of making a good picture is like building a Lego tower. And we have all these different Lego blocks. One's the rule of thirds, one's perspective, one's golden ratio, one's
repetition.
showing perspective, one's changing like how movement looks, like all these different things. It doesn't mean we have to use every block every time we build the tower. The key is, and my job is to give you as many tools in your toolbox, as many of those Lego blocks that you can use, and then you can make a determinate decision and say, I want to photograph this picture like X, Y, or Z. The key is I don't want you just like boom, 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 snapping away. I want you to think about what you're going to take a picture of and then do it and have the right tools behind you to help you execute rather than just spray and pray, point and shoot and hope. Okay. Good. Really good class, everyone. I hope that was very useful. I'm going to stop the recording.